Este vídeo apresenta as instruções de segurança para a evacuação dos auditórios A e B do edifício da Reitoria da Universidade Nova de Lisboa. Com uma lotação elevada de 579 pessoas, é essencial seguir as orientações para garantir uma evacuação rápida e segura. Os caminhos de evacuação estão desobstruídos e devidamente sinalizados. Existem 6 saídas de emergência equipadas com barras antipânico, sinalizadas com luz verde e sinal de fuga. Em caso de alarme, mantenha a calma e siga imediatamente as instruções da equipa de segurança. Dirija-se às saídas sinalizadas sem correr e sem levar objetos pessoais. Se houver fumo, mantenha-se junto ao chão e ajude pessoas com mobilidade reduzida. A evacuação será feita de forma ordenada por setores, sob orientação da equipa de segurança. A equipa de segurança é facilmente identificável por envergar coletes amarelos. Após sair do edifício, siga para o ponto de encontro e não regresse ao interior até a autorização. A sua colaboração é essencial para a segurança de todos.
Hello, everyone. Welcome. Welcome to the annual lecture in honor of Kofi Annan. I'm Lise Howard. I'm the past president of ACUNS. I'm a professor of government and foreign service at Georgetown University, and I'm currently serving as chair of the faculty of the School of Foreign Service at Georgetown. I'm very pleased to welcome today our hosts, to thank our distinguished guests for coming. General, thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you to our staff and our volunteers. Thank you, everybody, for coming today and for making this event possible. I want to say a quick word about this lecture, and then I'll introduce our guest. So the annual lecture in honor of Kofi Annan is a flagship plenary event held during the annual conference of the Academic Council on the UN system. It focuses on the themes of global peace, human rights, and dialogue. These ideas are in alignment, of course, with the legacy of the former UN Secretary General, Kofi Annan. Before he became Secretary General, Kofi Annan served as the Undersecretary General for Peace Operations. And I'd like to introduce the current Undersecretary General for Peace Operations. Jean-Pierre Lacroix is the USG for Peace Operations of the United Nations. He brings to the position over 25 years of political and diplomatic experience with a focus on multilateral organizations, United Nations activities and programs. Mr. Lacroix served in the French Ministry of Foreign Affairs as Director of UN, International Organizations and Human Rights, and La Francophonie. He previously had appointments including as Ambassador to Sweden, Chief of Protocol of France for the permanent mission to the UN, the French permanent mission to the UN, Deputy Chief of Mission of the French Embassy in Prague, First Secretary and Second Counselor of the French Embassy in Washington, D.C. It's quite a way to start a career. He also served as advisor at the cabinet of the French Prime Minister. Mr. Lacroix holds undergraduate degrees from the Institute of Economic and Commercial Sciences, ESSEC, the Institute for Political Studies, Sciences Po, and the National School of Administration, IENA. And he was a graduate of the class of Michel de Montaigne. I just want to put in perspective for a moment the magnitude of the work the USG does. So, as some of you have noticed, we've passed a budget for the UN and for UN peacekeeping. The annual 2026 budget of the whole United Nations system the whole operating budget is $3.45 million. That's the operating budget of the whole UN system. What was just passed is the operating budget of the Department of Peace Operations, and that is $5.1 billion. So $3.45 billion for all UN operations, And there's a separate budget for peacekeeping of 5.1 billion. And I think we're all breathing a bit of a sigh of relief that that has been agreed. The UN now fields 11 operations, mainly in the Middle East and Africa. It has troops from 116 different countries, so this is truly a global enterprise. 116 countries, we're at about 50,000 troops and thousands of staff support. So he holds a huge responsibility. He has served in this position for more than 9 years now. It's the longest serving Under Secretary General of Peace Operations. He's nearing the end of his term, and we're tremendously honored to have him here today. Please help me welcome Under Secretary General Jean-Pierre Lacroix for the Annan Lecture.
I'm not sure I need this mic, actually. Anyway, thank you very much, Lise, for your gracious introduction, and a very good afternoon to all of you. I want to thank ACUNS for inviting me. I want to thank Universidad Nova for hosting this conference, as well as hosting me. I believe I have to thank the government of Portugal as well for supporting this event. So, first of all, I won't clumsily repeat what you said about how many peacekeeping operations we have today, 11 of them. We currently have about 70,000 peacekeepers operating in those missions. There are civilians, there are military, there are police. I see in the room at least one distinguished general who was from Portugal, who had a very senior position in one of our missions. Welcome, General. And of course, Portugal is an important and valuable contributing country to peacekeeping. Now, what I wanted to say is first that those missions are very diverse in terms of their mandate, in terms of their size, in terms of their budget. Now, Lise, you reminded us that the current budget, the one that was adopted this year for peacekeeping is $5.1 billion. Now, for 1 year and for all of these operations, I used to say, or we used to say that this represents only 0.5% of total military expenditure every year in the world, but that is not the case, actually. This budget represents 0.2, that is 0.2% of world military expenditure. Not that I question or I'm against military expenditures. I mean, that is not my intention, but the intention is just to underline that what we do is supported by a relatively small budget. Of course, everybody would like to have $5.1 billion in his or her pocket, but still, it's relatively small. I'm saying that the missions are diverse. Some of them have large mandate. Some of them are more limited or reduced, constrained or limited mandates. The smaller mandates, if I can call them so, are about monitoring the respect of ceasefire. That's what our peacekeepers do in Cyprus or in Western Sahara or in Syria on the Golan Heights. Not to say that it has many challenges, but these are relatively limited mandates. And we have broader mandates, so-called multi-dimensional mandates, such as, for example, the mandates of our mission in the Central African Republic or South Sudan or the Democratic Republic of the Congo. And those mandates cover protection of civilians, essentially ensuring a degree of security and stability for population, facilitating humanitarian assistance to them, but also supporting diplomatic efforts, supporting peace efforts, and monitoring human rights, and doing a number of things related to capacity building. I mean, helping in the building of state capacity in key areas such as justice, correction, police, security forces, and so on and so forth. Now, those missions are also diverse in terms of the budget. You know, some of them, the biggest ones, have a budget of about $1 billion every year. That is against South Sudan, DR Congo, or Central African Republic, and others have a much smaller budget. But I think the key point, and I believe that really that will be one of the key messages of this presentation, is that all these missions, at the end of the day, they're all political. They are there, they're created to serve a political objective. They're not an end in themselves. They're created to at least create conditions for political efforts to durably solve a situation are there, or even to go beyond and to actively engage in supporting those political efforts. And the list of countries that were successfully returned to a much better degree of stability and peace is very long, and with the help of peacekeeping operation, that list is very long, starting from Angola, Mozambique, Sierra Leone, Liberia, Cambodia back in the 90s, Timor-Leste, that is the most recent operation, I believe, where that country ultimately reached stability with the help, and I'm insisting with the help. That is also important. It doesn't mean that peacekeeping operations in themselves are sufficient to achieve that result. There are tools serving that broader purpose. And then that raises the question of, what are the conditions for success? And I believe that I will belabor that a bit as we move forward. But it is something that is quite important to think about, especially as we are facing a number of challenges. Before I turn to these challenges, just to say that something that there is peacekeeping operations are nowhere to be found in the UN Charter. There's not a single word about peacekeeping operation, which means that they were constructed by experience, by learning lessons. I think there are pluses to that because the system has been very creative in devising a number of operations that are themselves very diverse with a high diversity of partnership. On the other hand, it has also its flip side in the sense that the UN were never created to support peacekeeping operations. Large field-based operations, they were absolutely not created for that. The UN was essentially created to be a secretariat. And we're facing a number of challenges and rigidity that are essentially resulting from that situation. Now, turning to the challenges. But I think before we talk about the challenges, I think it's important to highlight also what the peacekeepers do briefly. I mean, every single day I keep saying that our peacekeepers protect sometimes very directly and exclusively hundreds of thousands of civilians, again, every single day. And they also prevent ceasefires from deteriorating, from unraveling, because they do, there are lots of incidents in those ceasefire situations, and that those incidents can easily escalate between parties that usually do not talk to one another and mistrust one another. So by being there and liaising, deconflicting, then they also prevent those ceasefires from collapsing, which obviously would then thoroughly undermine any political efforts. Having said this, we are facing a number of challenges. 4 of them, I think, mainly. The number one challenge is related to what I'm saying about the political nature of peacekeeping. The conditions for success, where Timor-Leste, Cambodia, Sierra Leone, is basically you have a political agreement, you have an agreement between conflicting parties, then a peacekeeping operation is deployed to support the implementation of that peace agreement, and ultimately, when that process is successfully completed, then the peacekeeping operation goes. But for that to be achieved, then it takes more than a peacekeeping operation. It takes also political efforts to move forward, to progress. And there you need to have an international community, member states united, committed, supporting actively those political efforts, encouraging, pressuring the parties to move forward. That takes unity, that takes commitment, that takes what, unfortunately, we don't have anymore, because we have a divided international community, we have a divided Security Council. At best, they look away because there are so many other things happening. At worst, a group of countries support one party to a conflict and another group support another party to a conflict. And then, of course, there is no progress in the political efforts, meaning that our peacekeeping operations have to stay because they can't leave unless they are expelled by the host government, in which case usually things go from bad to worse. We saw that in Haiti or in Darfur or in Mali. But in most cases, they just stay. That doesn't mean that they don't play an important role. They prevent volatile situations from collapsing altogether, from turning into complete chaos. But it has negative aspects to that. Staying longer means that there can be fatigue, there can be growing discrepancy between expectations and what those peace operations can actually achieve, and so on and so forth. So that's the number one challenge that we're facing, essentially a divided Security Council, a divided international community that, yes, is united enough to extend the mandates of our peace operation in most cases, but it's not united enough to push resolutely those political processes that are so important for the collective success. The number two challenge is, I believe, equally important, and that is what I would call a challenge of legitimacy. The Security Council is not reflective anymore of today's world reality. We have new emerging powers, we have a different balance of power, and the Security Council is not reformed. And that creates a sense of frustration and a sense of eroding legitimacy. I'm not saying no legitimacy anymore, but the sense of eroding legitimacy. And that is also the perception of those who are the recipient of peacekeeping operation, including the population themselves, certainly the parties. I mean, they see, in addition to seeing that the Security Council and the international community is divided, which of course is good for them because they can play one against the other, but they also see that there is this eroding legitimacy, that we emanate as peacekeeping operation from a body which is not seen anymore as fully legitimate, fully reflecting the reality of today's world. It's, of course, a very difficult, tough nut to crack, because we all know that reforming the Security Council is very aspirational, but I think it deserves to be emphasized, because that is a problem that we're facing, and we will be facing that increasingly. And of course, then the absence of progress in the political processes themselves can or tends to erode the legitimacy of our own peacekeeping operation in the field, especially as I said, they stay for like 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, even though ultimately, they continue to be successful. Like Cyprus, that mission has been around for like 50, 60 years. They're very successful in doing what they were created to do, that is, to preserve a ceasefire. But the situation in Cyprus has not yet been solved politically. Now, the third challenge is a more operational challenge, in the sense that we're facing increasingly dangerous, complex operational environment. We have new forms of threats against the civilians, against our own peacekeepers, digital technology, AI, drones, new forms of sophisticated attacks with improvised explosive devices, all that kind of thing. Mis and disinformation, which is weaponized. It's always been there, in conflict situations, but now, of course, it's exponentially impactful because of the technological enablers. And in addition to that, we're also seeing the increased impact of drivers of conflict, such as climate change, transnational criminal activities, which are not seen enough as the key drivers of conflict that they actually are in so many places. Most of the places in which we have peacekeeping operations, they are the number one or very up there, in the list of drivers of conflict. Transnational criminal activities, and also the illegal exploitation of natural resources, all kind of trafficking, but also the threat of global terrorism. So that is the third challenge. That is, the operational deterioration of the operational environment in which our peacekeepers are operating. And then the fourth challenge is a financial challenge. To me, it's more it's a consequence of the political challenge. We're not very expensive. So a question of having some member states not paying or not paying in full what they have to pay, the assessed contribution that they're obligated to pay to peacekeeping and the UN is more a result of the political issues that we're faced. But at the same time, last year, the number one financial contributors to peacekeeping, that is the United States, only paid half of what they have to pay, and they normally pay 25% of our own total budget. So they only paid half of it, and the result of that is that we had to save 15%, more or less, and saving 15% of liquidity means that we had to cut about 25% of our capacities. That is, our peacekeeping operation now have to do the same, but with less. And of course, the challenge will be how to revert to a situation where all our member states pay in full. We had a good outcome when it comes to the adoption of our peacekeeping budget just a few days ago. There was also a solution found to a problem, which I will not enter into the detail, but essentially, if it had not been solved, the UN would have been forced to return money that they never received. But still, that is a major challenge. Now, in terms of how can we respond to these challenges, and first of all, I would recall that we currently have, we're about to complete a review of peace operations, and there will be a couple of messages which I believe will inform the way forward. But I think number one is how to respond to these challenges. First of all, with facts. And facts is about what our peacekeepers do every single day and explain the successes, not only the challenges, but again, the successes in preserving ceasefire, in saving so many people, in building capacity, in preventing situations that are fragile and volatile from falling into utter chaos. That is important. That is quite critical, especially since, if you remove those operations, then every possible chance for any progress in peacekeeping, in the political processes are gone. So we have to communicate better on the achievements of our peacekeepers. We're very much involved in doing that. We need your support, and I believe we have your support for that. And thank you all for being so committed to highlighting the achievements of our peacekeepers, short-term, medium-term, and long-term, of course. And research has been really instrumental in proving that peacekeeping ultimately is a worth investment. Second, we need to convey to our member states that peacekeeping is not enough to achieve the ultimate objective of durably solving a political solution, that they have their own responsibility. The member states need to understand that, again, it's not enough to create an external mandate. We need more support to our peacekeeping operations, especially when they face challenges on the ground with the host countries, the host parties, but we also need more support and more united and committed support in supporting political processes. That is, I believe, a key message. Now, second, we have to talk to our member states about mandates. Mandates are always complicated. They're the result of political compromises in the Security Council. And sometimes there are criticisms that the mandates are too broad and like Christmas tree covering so many different things. Yes, we agree. I think we would need to have more prioritized mandates. I'm talking about prioritized mandates because, again, it's a compromise. Those mandates are compromised, so they will always be a mixed bag of all kinds of things, and most of them quite useful, actually. The question is, can we do all of this? Could some of these mandated tasks be done by others? And then another thing is, it's a trickier debate than what could think, because if you talk about prioritized mandates or streaming mandates, some member states would have very different views in terms of what could be removed from the mandates, perhaps human rights, or others would think something else. There is no consensus on that. Now, the third important message will be that we have to draw a line more clearly about what peacekeeping can do and what peacekeeping cannot do. And it's, and the related question of robust peacekeeping, the use of force, and so on and so forth. I'm not too sure that I like the phrase that sometimes is used, peacekeeping without a peace to keep. It kind of resonates, but the thing is that if you have a peacekeeping mission, then inevitably the situation in which that mission will be deployed is tricky and volatile. So it's not exactly peace. It's in between.
To me, the criteria that points either to peacekeeping being warranted as a tool or not is the existence of an agreement between conflicting parties. It can be a ceasefire, it can be a more complex agreement, including political aspects, a path, a roadmap towards a political solution. But if you don't have any agreement between conflicting parties, there's no point in deploying a peacekeeping operation. There could be reasons to deploy peace enforcement, which in itself presupposes an agreement on whom to enforce against. But we don't do peace enforcement. Peace enforcement is synonymous to waging war. That has to be done by others. We're ready to support. We do it in Haiti. We do it with Somalia. We're ready to do more with African Union operation according to Security Council Resolution 2719. But this is not for the blue helmets. Having said this, though, that leaves open the question of what is the limit of robust peacekeeping? Meaning, what is the extent to which we accept some risk? And what is the extent to which member states, particularly troop and police contributing country, accept some risk? That is something that I believe we need to think about. Now, the fourth element would be, in terms of the responses, well, we have to obviously adapt to the challenges that I mentioned, the operational challenges that I mentioned. We're doing a lot of work under the slogan umbrella, Action for Peacekeeping. There are lots of initiatives about improving the safety and security of our peacekeepers, adapting digital technology to peacekeeping, more women in peacekeeping, and more women empowered through peacekeeping, which we believe is a key criteria for effectiveness. Better effectiveness against mis and disinformation, etc., etc. Well, lots of initiatives, and they need to be continued and even stepped up. And unfortunately, all of these initiatives are financed not by the peacekeeping budget, but by voluntary contribution, which obviously is a bit of a limitation, but we absolutely need to move forward. And then the last remark that I will make on this sort of rubric of how to respond to that is, I keep saying that peacekeeping operations are not an end in themselves. And this is a very strong message because it implies that political efforts should be front and center, and that is also the responsibility, of course, the responsibility of the UN in as much as we participate in those political efforts, but also the responsibility of our member states. But we're saying this as well to sort of convey the message that the challenge to peacekeeping will never be fixed only with technical responses. Yes, we do action for peacekeeping, all these things that I mentioned, digital technology, safety and security, counting drones and all that kind of thing, but it won't be enough. Now, having said this, I also believe that to some extent, from the more narrower point of view of the organization of the United Nations, yes, peacekeeping operations are also a bit of an end in themselves, because they do represent UN in action, together with our humanitarian colleagues. There are people in the field close to population affected by conflict, visible, known, peacekeeping, the Blue Helmets are a brand, and I believe that the organization needs to keep that, because otherwise, if we don't see those humanitarian, those Blue Helmets on the field, then the perception of the UN will be different. It will be seen as a secretariat, as grey suit like me sitting in desks and doing stuff which are not quite visible, immediately visible at least. Now, just to conclude, and I'll be very brief, I know time is running out. First of all, again, primacy of politics is absolutely key. This is a message to us, but also to our member states, all of us. I want to sort of speak briefly to what some member states are talking about, what the direction of travel for the UN should be, and some of them, like the United States, are saying back to basics, back to peace and security. Well, of course, the UN cannot do everything, and yes, the Charter is really about peace and security in the first place. Then the question is, but what is relevant to building durable peace and stability? And this is where I believe that notion of back to basics at least deserves some discussions. Again, there are lots of other entities working on, development and so on and so forth. Development is obviously critical, as well as human rights to durable peace and stability. And again, it's open to discussion, I believe. It's one of the topic which I believe deserves more attention. Now, the second thing is, there's some doubts about the future of the UN and whether multilateralism is going down the drain and all that kind of thing. And I don't want to sort of, no one has a crystal ball, but I'm saying that, number one, I believe that multilateralism is the true realism because most of the world challenges are global and they cannot be addressed only by one country or a group of countries. That is evident. And I also believe that the vast majority of our member states, many of them relatively small developing countries, they absolutely want a strong UN, not because, again, the UN is not an end in itself, the organization is not an end in itself. The Charter is. It's international law, it regulates the use of force. Of course, it's violated, like our national laws are violated too, but that doesn't mean we should throw them to the bin. So this is where I believe there is a difference with the League of Nations. We still have a very strong constituency of member states who want a strong, reformed yet, but still strong UN. And then finally, yes, all of this is true, but at the same time, we also have non-state actors that are increasingly powerful. The civil society, which we've been engaging with, and we need to engage even more because they are critically influential with, in many of our member states in different ways, but also in terms of how we engage locally in our peacekeeping operation, with civil society to make sure that they are empowered and part of the political processes. But we also have these emerging non-state actors, very powerful, the tech companies, most of them way more powerful than many of our member states. We need to interact with them. We need to, we can't just do as if they don't exist. They do. And I believe that moving forward, we'll have to take that into account in terms of how the UN position itself vis-à-vis those different sort of non-state actors. I will leave it at that. Thank you for your kind attention, and I'll be looking forward to your question. Many thanks. Shall we go to which one? This one, this one?
Could you come to this one, please? Thank you. Thank you so much, USG. And thank you, everyone, for your patience. We're running, we had to start a little bit late for understandable reasons. We're going to run to about 25 minutes past 1. So I'll take the liberty of asking the first question. But then we'd like to hear from you in the audience. This is an amazing opportunity to have the USG with us today, toward the end of his term, to talk about peacekeeping. So USG, you spoke about the conditions for peace and that you need to have a peace agreement in order to have a peacekeeping operation. We are talking about coming to agreements now, possibly in Gaza, maybe in southern Lebanon, maybe in the Strait of Hormuz. I'm just going to dive right into the hot seat, if that's okay with you. We know from academic work that where there's a promise of peacekeepers, you're more likely to have a peace agreement. This has been demonstrated numerous times in numerous academic studies. Where there's a promise of peacekeepers, we are more likely to come to a peace agreement. So there's a little bit of a chicken and egg problem. Where there's a promise of third parties to monitor the ceasefire, to implement the provisions in the peace agreement, you're more likely to get one. Is there movement on that front today in our big hotspots in the world?
Right. Well, I think that you mentioned a couple of situations where, I mean, they're different in the sense that, Lebanon, we have a peacekeeping operation, and yet there are diplomatic processes without the UN, but then the UN is also supporting. And so the question is, if I look at what you're saying about how, what are the best conditions for a success, basically, of peace efforts? I think the added value of UN being involved in UN operation is that ultimately you have a more solid platform of legitimacy, because by definition, those outfits, those operations would be created by, let's say, the international, it's a bit of a more valise, as we said, but the international community as a whole. And what that means is, first of all, the level of acceptance for that is usually greater. I'm not saying, that doesn't contradict what I'm saying about the erosion of legitimacy of the Security Council and the erosion of legitimacy of those missions have to stay for like decades and decades, but still, there is that degree of acceptance and legitimacy that is likely to be higher than the operations that are just under the umbrella of one member state or even a limited group of member states. And I think Afghanistan is an interesting example for that, because the international operation in Afghanistan was really under NATO, but in the end, its future was totally dependent on the domestic situation of one country, that is the United States. Mm-hmm. And the lesson that I learned is that if you have such an operation, then without the UN umbrella, without the UN sort of cover, then the governments that are involved in those operations are likely to pay a higher political price, because they're more exposed. Those operations are seen much more as their operation by the constituency, by the public opinion in those countries, by the political parties. The UN operations are seen as UN, and that sort of dilutes the political prices to be paid by all participating governments. Interesting. And that is also why they're able to stay for decades, with challenges, but still without any of the participating countries really paying a high political price for that. Mm. Otherwise, you could ask, why are we involved in the Central African Republic? Why are we sending soldiers there? I mean, it's far, we have no security threat from that country. And again, if it's UN, then it's a UN operation. Each participating member states has a sort of double line. Yes, we're serving peace and security. We're serving the UN, and we're doing this with many other countries. In fact, to some extent, with the whole international community. Right. I think, to me, that is a very powerful sort of platform of legitimacy, which then increases at least the durability, maybe not necessarily the chances of ultimate success, although I think so, because being durable implies a higher chance of success. What we keep saying also to our member states is, please, you need to have strategic patience. It takes time to rebuild peace. It takes decades. And we are all aware that it sometimes contradicts the need for short-term result that is so much demanded by governments, especially those with active parliaments. Maybe I will leave it at that. I'm not sure I totally answered your question.
That is a great takeaway for all of us, I think, for our own governments, is that it's in order for peace to work in the Middle East, as was the case in 1948 and the founding of Israel and all of the, the first Nakba, that is, it is incumbent on all of us, on all states in the world, to think about contributing to the mission. That you don't want to have one state out on the line as seen as responsible for the success of a mission, or to contribute to a peacekeeping mission. Okay, that is, I think, very helpful. Leila, who's actually from Beirut, why don't you start us off today? Thank you. Leila Nichols. Actually, why don't you introduce yourself now that I've started to introduce you?
Good morning. My name is Leila Nicholas from Lebanon. Thank you for this great opportunity and for this presentation. It was very insightful. I will talk about the UNIFIL. UNIFIL mandate is going to be terminated this year. The UNIFIL in Lebanon was one of the most successful peacekeeping mandates in the world. The UNIFIL mandate was successful due to the rules of engagement. The rules of engagement were limited, and we were successful in peacebuilding, peacemaking, and in monitoring. Political pressures they are being Lebanon this year. The mandate decisions, so that like draw the conclusions from the UNIFIL. I think that the UNIFIL leads the security environment will lead more catastrophic humanitarian issues, and I think the security in southern Lebanon will be created. Thank you.
Can I rephrase just a little bit? Is there a possibility of a follow-on mission after UNIFIL? If the administration, the American administration, doesn't support UNIFIL anymore, is there a possibility of a follow-on?
Right. First of all, I think it's clear that when a peace conference leaves for political solution, the best successful really myself up, but usually it's bad news. Haiti, right? Haiti, Mediterranean, there were negative aspects to that mission, but no one was talking about it anymore. When at that time, and political distinction had been solved, but the security problems solved. And then the mission left, probably because I can't remember at that time, I think it was suspended, and the situation started to unravel, and Mali leading down for the state. In the case of Lebanon, so the Security Council also decided to term the mandate deal on the 31st of December, but as a compromise, they also requested, the Security Council requested us to come up with the option for UN presence after UNIFIL departure. So we listened to the Lebanese authorities, and they told us essentially, I think they don't want to return home without the UN and facing the Israeli Defense Forces, but they told us we would be interested in keeping a presence centered around observation, monitoring, reporting, deconfliction liaison. They're very much the job of military observers, plus a few capacities which we think we could use and that you have UN, like mining, demining, engineering, and so on and so forth. So we said, fine, you're the host government, so we listened to you, and we will come up with, and we did come up with options differing by their size, but not by their mandate or their potential mandate, which is doing what I said we would do, military observers, plus unarmed, plus what it takes to make sure that they would be protected with mobility, healthcare, quick reaction, all that kind of thing. Now, it's for the Security Council to decide whether they will mandate or not, create or not that presence after UNIFIL. And I think that there are a couple of very many moving parts there. First of all, there is currently this agreement between Israel, Lebanon, and what will be the fate of that agreement. It's questioned, it's lots of controversy in Lebanon. What will be the security situation, which so far has been characterized by less hostilities, but not a full ceasefire? How will that evolve? What will be the evolution regarding Iran and US? And of course, that is critically influential on Lebanon. And what will be also, what about the other initiatives, the supporting initiative by potentially the EU, a few European member states, France, Italy? I believe that the position of the UN will be critical to determine whether there will be or not a post-UNIFIL presence. And I believe that a lot would depend on whether and to what extent there will be space between the Israeli position, which would be happy to see us go, and the US, who may have, you've seen all that, the US is very concerned about the situation in Lebanon, not, disturbing their efforts with Iran. So they want to keep it at a sort of low level intensity. Mm-hmm. And from that point of view, I believe that the UN presence after UNIFIL might help by reassuring Lebanon, by deconflicting also, because the IDF will be there as well, by supporting the Lebanese armed forces, which needs a lot of support and way beyond what the UN can do. So it needs a lot of bilateral support. So that is my view, but again, it depends on the Security Council. US position will be key. They might see it otherwise as I see it. So the jury is still out.
Thank you, USG. Okay. We have 3 minutes and 3 questions, at least, that I've seen. So I would like to take the 3 questions, and if you keep them to just and you decide which one you want to answer. How about that? So over here, the gentleman, if you can just, okay, we'll wait for the microphone. Sorry to make you, if you can just introduce yourself very quickly and ask your question. We don't have time for comments, unfortunately.
Yes, thank you very much. Really appreciate your talk. Umar Mirza from Minhaj University, Lahore. One question mostly I have is, if this trend continues financially, and the member states do indeed not pay up more, what are the hard choices actually you or your the USG, would have to make or is forced to make because of the situation going on? And the opposite actually, if you would indeed have the financing you're looking for, it would increase. What are the things you would do you're not able to do now?
Great. Okay, first question I'll find Annika, if you can ask the next one, and then we'll have the former head of the Timor-Leste mission, Sukihiro.
Thank you very much. My name is Annika Lee Norberg. I'm head of Peace Operations, Peace Building at the Geneva Center for Security Geneva Center for Security Policy. One could have thought that we had coordinated, because I wanted to ask, we're currently living in very turbulent geopolitical times, and we know that the situations can change very unpredictably and rapidly. So what if all of a sudden there's a windfall of funding? That was my question. So you have 3 billion back. What would be your top 3 priorities where to invest? What is most required for the future?
Great. Okay, similar question. Excellent. Thank you, Annika. And then Hasegawa-sensei, please ask our final question. Right behind you, sir. Sorry. Yeah.
Thank you very much. My name is Kehiro Hasegawa. I served first as a director of policy and planning in UNOSOM 2 in Somalia. Then I was a resident and humanitarian coordinator in Rwanda and worked with Paul Kagame, and finished my career as a SRCG in Timor-Leste. And I very much appreciated your comment that it's the national leaders who build the peace and keep it, that the UN is there only to help. Now, my experience in Somalia, I found was rather discouraging at that time, because leaders are not interested in that. And so my question to you, sir, is how do you decide in the keeping peacekeeping operations or peace-building operations when you find that the national leaders are not interested in keeping a peace and building peace?
Okay.
Thank you.
The easiest question in the world for the last one. Thank you, Hasegawa-sensei. We always appreciate your wisdom.
Thank you very much. I will start with the last question. Yes, I agree to some extent with the fact that the responsibility of peace in a given country or situation lies with the local leaders. It also lies with the population. The population wants peace usually. I mean, they may see differently peace. But I also convinced that when conflicting parties sign the peace agreement, it's never in good faith. It's just because they have to, because they usually determine that it's not in their interest to continue fighting. So this is where the influence, I mean, let's face it, the friendly pressure, maybe there's a not so friendly pressure on parties to a conflict, to an agreement, needs to be real. I'm convinced that the Sierra Leone and the Timor-Leste and the Angola and the Cambodia peace were also reached because the international community put their weight, they put their shoulder to the wheel and really exercised, influence, let's face it, pressure on the local leaders to the benefit of peace and the population. Because ultimately, yes, sometimes the leaders may not be interested in peace, but the population usually are. So this is where I'm not like 100% with the line that, it's only the local leaders that have to, of course, they're instrumental, but without strong push from the international community, usually it's less likely to work. Now, on the question that were asked on the financial resources, I think that if important financial contributors continue not to pay, and particularly like if we see the same scenario as the one we saw last year, then I believe we're doomed. And if we repeat again the non-payment or partial payment this year, then we will come to the member states, we'll tell them, look, we cannot implement the mandates that you gave us anymore. You're not consistent. You create those mandates and yet you're not paying for them. And I will be very clear, we'll have to be very clear. It's already very difficult for our operation to work without, with less than 25% cuts. If we have to have another 20% cut, it's just impossible. And we'll tell them, look, we will sort of close shops and until you either terminate our mandates or decide to pay fully what the resources that you not only that is the implication of the mandate, also the resources that you yourself voted when you voted our budget. Now, but if we were to have more money, then what would we do? I think that the bottom line, and maybe there's something that I should have said before, but we need to keep the readiness of our system. And keeping the readiness means a lot of efforts in terms of adapting our system. Digital technology, AI, cost effectiveness, more women in peacekeeping, mission discipline, you name it. And not only because we need to constantly adapt the existing peacekeeping mission, because even with all the division in our international community, Security Council, if currently a conflict situation becomes a post-conflict situation, like Sudan, Ukraine, who knows, and then if we are asked to either create or contribute to creating a peacekeeping operation, a monitoring ceasefire or whatever, then we would need to be ready for that. And my point is that, for example, if we have to create a peacekeeping operation to monitor a ceasefire today, it would have to be radically different from what we did 60 years ago. Everything has changed. Technology, warfare, even the nature of violations of ceasefire is different. So it takes a lot of effort to adapt. And, if we have more resources, then that is exactly what we would do, actually. We would really put a lot of effort on stepping up these efforts to adapt our system, because we cannot, and I don't want to proceed under the assumption that our international community will always be divided, that there will never be any appetite to for the international community to respond to crises through multilateral tools such as peacekeeping. Maybe yes, maybe not. But what I know is that there are lots of faults given to potential peace operation or monitoring ceasefire in Sudan, even in Ukraine. Back then we don't do planning because we cannot do, but others are thinking about that. It may come our way, it may not, but if it comes our way, then again we have to be ready.
Excellent. Thank you so much, USG. We really appreciate your coming today. Thank you, everybody, for being here today. Please help me thank the USG, and we have to watch one quick publicity after this because of our wonderful tourism hosts here in Lisbon. But first, let me thank USG Lacroix. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Our hosts are sponsoring lunch right after we watch this. Lunch will be right out there, but please stay seated to watch this one. Okay.
This is art.
Okay, but this is art.
No, art is this.
But art is light.
And light is art.
Okay, and perspective needs art.
Yours, please.
Look, this is art.
No, this is art. And this is art. And this.
And this.
And this.
And this.
And this.
Listen, this is art.
Art, technique.
Or influence?
Yeah, I agree.